The day my best friend asked me to co-sign his loan, I said yes, because I already knew what he'd done in my house, and I needed his signature on that paper a lot more than he needed mine. I was really sick that week. Not the kind of sick where you drink some tea and feel better the next day. The real kind, where your whole body hurts, your throat is on fire, and you can barely lift your head off the pillow. The doctor at urgent care said it was the flu. He said it like it was no big deal. It didn't feel that way to me. I spent the whole week on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, drifting in and out of sleep. Claire took care of me for the first 2 days. She brought me tea with honey, put a cool cloth on my forehead, and spoke to me softly. That gentle version of her was one of the reasons I married her. Then something shifted. It wasn't sudden. It wasn't loud. She just slowly became a little colder. A little more distant. She started carrying her phone everywhere, even to the bathroom. She laughed at messages but turned the screen away before I could see. And at night, when I'd wake up from the fever, I'd hear her walking around the house in the dark. Quiet. Like she didn't want to be heard. 2 weeks later, she looked me in the eyes, smiled, and told me she was pregnant. And I should have felt only joy. Instead, the first thing I felt was a chill, because what she said next didn't make any sense at all. She held the pregnancy test in both hands, tears in her eyes. "I think it happened that weekend," she said softly. "When you were homesick. We were resting together on the couch. It was perfect." I stared at her. "That weekend?" I repeated. "Yes," she nodded. "We didn't go anywhere. It was just the two of us." I kissed her forehead. I said all the right things. I told her I was happy. But I remembered that weekend very clearly. I remembered the fever. I remembered shaking so hard my teeth were chattering. I remembered being too weak to walk to the kitchen for a glass of water. I remembered not touching her. That night, after she fell asleep, I opened my fitness app. I use it to track everything: steps, heart rate, sleep, workouts. I've run 2 half marathons. I log every single day without fail. I looked up that week. 0 steps. 0 workouts. 0 activity. Not 1 calorie burned outside of being alive. The app had even put up a cheerful little message: "Looks like you're taking it easy this week." I sat there in the dark staring at that screen and felt something cold move through me. If Claire was telling the truth, my own memory was lying to me. But if my memory was right, my wife had just looked me in the eyes and told me a very carefully planned lie. I wanted to be wrong. I would have traded every piece of pride I had to be wrong. The next morning I asked her, as calmly as I could, "Are you sure about the timing?" She didn't pause. Not even for half a second. "Yes." "No, I think so." "No, maybe." Just yes. Fast. Clean. Like she'd rehearsed it. I tried to act normal for a few days. I told myself I was being paranoid. I told myself this was the woman I loved. But I kept noticing things. At night when I moved close to her, she shifted away. When I asked about her day, she gave short answers. And when my best friend Ethan came over one afternoon with soup and a smile, Claire went very quiet, too quiet, like something about his being there made her uncomfortable. Ethan and I had been friends since we were 17. We grew up together. He knew my house alarm code. He had a spare key. That's the kind of friendship we had. Then I remembered something. That sick weekend, Ethan had texted me from outside my house. "Need anything? I'm grabbing groceries." I'd been too sick to reply. There was a bag of oranges on the counter when I finally got up, so I figured he'd dropped them off and driven away. I never thought about it again. Until now. That text suddenly felt completely different. Because Ethan knew the door code. He had a key. And the woman I married had just told me a story about that exact weekend that my own body said wasn't true. So I went into our home Wi-Fi router settings. It's the kind that logs every device that connects to it, by name. I scrolled through the list from that sick weekend. And I found it. Ethan's iPhone. Not some unknown device. Not a stranger's phone. My best friend's name, right there in my router log, connected to my home network late at night during the exact weekend my wife said our baby was conceived. I closed the laptop and sat there for a long time. Not thinking. Just staring at the wall. 15 years of friendship. 8 years of marriage. And I couldn't tell which one hurt more. I saved the router records and emailed them to myself. Then I backed them up in a second place, because I still couldn't fully believe what I was seeing. One evening, Claire left her smartwatch on the bathroom sink while she showered. I was brushing my teeth when the screen lit up showing her heart rate history. There was a spike late that night, 12:47 a.m., the kind of level you see during hard exercise, or fear, or something else I didn't want to name. The spike could have meant anything. A nightmare. Anxiety. I told myself that 3 times before I stopped believing it. She came out of the bathroom with a towel around her hair. She looked at me. Then she looked at the watch. Her smile disappeared. "What are you doing?" she asked. "Nothing," I said quickly. She grabbed it off the counter. "Don't touch my settings," she said, voice tight. I didn't sleep at all that night. I ordered a paternity test. I didn't want to. It felt horrible just thinking about it. But I needed facts before I could do anything else. When the results came back, I opened the envelope alone in my car, hands not quite steady. Relief hit me first, hard and fast. But then it faded. Because the baby being mine didn't change what the router logs showed. It didn't explain why my best friend's phone was in my house at 1 in the morning while I was passed out sick. The truth was still out there. Then Ethan called with a big opportunity. "I'm buying a property," he said, voice full of excitement. "Great deal. But the bank wants a cosigner because my income looks complicated between commissions. You have steady work and clean credit. You just sign, you're not paying anything. It's just to make the bank happy." I knew I should say no. But I didn't want to say no. "Send me the details," I said. He laughed, relieved. That's my guy. Over the next few days I played the role he expected. Nervous questions. Careful hesitation. I let him talk me through it the way a salesman works a deal. And I made him say out loud, more than once, that every payment was his responsibility and my signature was purely a formality. Then I asked for one small thing. If I'm signing this, I'd like a standard indemnity agreement in writing. Just a cosigner protection clause, my lawyer says it's routine. Something that confirms you're responsible for any payments if I ever get called on this. Ethan paused. Then he shrugged. "Fine," he said. "If it makes you feel better." That right there. If it makes you feel better. The casual generosity of a man who thinks he's already won. My lawyer drew it up in plain language with real teeth. Ethan signed it at the kitchen table without reading past the first paragraph. The day of the loan signing, Ethan showed up at the bank in a nice suit, smiling like a man who had already moved into his new life. We signed the documents. He clapped me hard on the back walking out. "Easy, right," he said. "Come over tonight," I said. "You and Claire. I want to talk." His smile flickered just slightly. "Both of you." "She's my wife," I said simply. He laughed, but it sounded off. "Sure, whatever you need." That evening I set the kitchen table like I was having people over for dinner. Glasses of water. A plate of crackers no one would touch. The light turned up bright. I wanted every face visible. I wanted nowhere to hide. Claire arrived first. One hand resting on her stomach, face calm and careful. Ethan came 10 minutes later with a bottle of wine, acting like this was just another normal night. I didn't smile at either of them. I placed a folder on the table. They both looked at it. Claire's eyes went straight to it. Ethan's jaw tightened just slightly, barely enough to notice, but I noticed. First, I slid a paper toward Ethan. The indemnity agreement. I watched his eyes move across the page. I watched the exact moment he understood what he'd put his name on. Then I slid the paternity results toward Claire. She went completely still. Then a flash of relief crossed her face. "It's yours," she whispered. "I know," I said. That's not why we're here. I opened my laptop and turned the screen toward both of them. Router records. Dates. Times. His name. Ethan's iPhone, connected, 12:41 a.m. Ethan's iPhone, connected, 1:13 a.m. Ethan's iPhone, connected, 1:56 a.m. Claire's face drained of color slowly, like water leaving a glass. Ethan's voice came out rough. I stopped by to check on you. I clicked to the next file. Claire's smartwatch data. The heart rate curve matched those times closely enough. You watched me struggle to breathe, I said, keeping my voice level, and you still let him into our house. Ethan shot up from his chair so fast it scraped loud across the floor. This is insane. You're paranoid. Sit down, I said. I didn't raise my voice. Not even slightly. He didn't sit. But he stopped moving. Then they looked at each other, just for 1 second. That one look told me everything. Ethan's face hardened. What do you want? No apology. No explanation. Straight to negotiation. Like he still thought he was running this. Here's what happens now, I said. I looked at Ethan first. That loan is yours. Every payment, every month, on time. If the bank comes after me for even $1, I will use that agreement you signed today and take back everything you put up as collateral. His mouth opened. Nothing came out. Then I looked at Claire. And you are going to stop lying. Starting right now. Her eyes filled with tears. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said something I hadn't expected. You were gone even before you got sick, she said quietly. You were always working. Always tired. I didn't know how to reach you anymore. I kept trying and you kept disappearing and eventually she stopped. Her hands pressed flat against the table. I'm not saying it was right. I know it wasn't right. I sat with that. She wasn't wrong about the distance. I knew that. There had been 2 years of early mornings and late nights and half conversations ending with "we'll talk tomorrow." I had told myself that was just how marriage looked after the early years. I had been wrong about that too. That's a real thing, I said finally. And we should have talked about it. Before any of this. She looked down at the table. I slid the last paper across to her. Separation documents. A clear plan for custody that put the baby first. Her hands were shaking as she reached for it. Ethan grabbed his jacket. You set me up, he said, his voice low and hard. For a second, I almost smiled. That's when I knew I had changed. You walked into it, I said. He left. The door closed behind him with a sound that felt very final. Claire stayed at the table, crying quietly, both hands resting on her stomach. I never stopped loving you, she said. I believed she believed that. That was the saddest part. Love isn't just something you say when you're scared, I told her. It's what you do when no one is watching. I didn't throw her out that night. I moved my things to the guest room, changed the alarm code, updated the Wi-Fi password. Later, sitting alone in the guest room in the dark, I thought about Ethan. 17 years old, both of us, standing outside a convenience store on a Tuesday night with nothing to do and nowhere to be. He had made me laugh so hard that night I couldn't breathe. I couldn't remember now what it was even about. I had lost more than a marriage that evening. I had lost the only person who had known me before I became whoever I was now. And no indemnity agreement, no router log, no carefully constructed folder could give that back. There are some victories that don't feel like winning. I didn't feel powerful. I didn't feel vindicated. I just felt clear. And sometimes, after everything has been taken apart and laid on the table in bright light, clarity is the only thing left standing. It turned out to be enough. Barely. But enough. This is where the story ends. If you liked it, make sure to hit the like button, share it with others, and subscribe for more stories like this.